Today I have with me State Representative Fue Lee from House District 59A in the state of Minnesota, representing the city of Minneapolis. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Irene.
So how has COVID-19 impacted you and/or the state of Minnesota?
So COVID-19 has really changed the way that we operate in the state of Minnesota, especially over at the state legislature. Right now, most of our committee hearings are through virtual committees through Zoom. Our floor session are either offline through Zoom like this and having a limited amount of people on the House floor. But it has really changed how we operate, and I think that it will continue to do so once we keep moving forward post-COVID or whenever COVID is over.
What efforts has Minnesota or Minneapolis undertaken to address the pandemic?
So the state of Minnesota has partnered up with the private sector to achieve 20,000 tests per day, and we announced this partnership back in April and May, and just this last month we were able to achieve that. And so right now we're getting a lot of test results back, and there's a quick turnaround. But even despite this success in testing, the latest report from the Minnesota Department of Health said that right now COVID cases are rising in the state of Minnesota, where we were at about 2% before. Right now we're hovering around 5%, and it's going in the wrong direction. And so we're taking extra precautions to see what can we do to limit the rise of COVID-19 cases right now. And in particular, we have some initiatives like other states in the country where we have mandatory face masks when you're out in public. And right now, we just announced our social distancing protocol for schools, where we're in a hybrid model, where still allowing for our local units of government to make the decision to see if they want to send kids to school, and also allow for a hybrid where potentially kids can go to school Mondays and Tuesday, and then split it up with kids for Wednesday and Thursday, so that we can have max capacity in the classroom but still be safe.
And have you seen any policies at the local or state level that haven't worked?
Not necessarily right now. From the city of Minneapolis, the mayor of Minneapolis have taken on more stringent policy compared to the governor, where we have a citywide mask mandate, I believe, a month before the governor. And right now, the mayor of Minneapolis have dialed back on our bars and restaurants, saying that even though at the state level we could have outdoor dining, in the city of Minneapolis we're going to limit that so that we only have indoor bar use, so that we could limit the rise in COVID cases in the city.
So has economic activity resumed in Minnesota? And if not, what would you say is needed to resume economic activity?
Economic activity is slowly resuming in the state of Minnesota, but right now, I believe just last week we have an economic forecast saying that the state of Minnesota is going to have just a little bit over $4 billion deficit. And so right now we're still trying to figure out what we need to do to prepare ourselves for the next legislative session in 2021 to look at how do we raise revenue, or if not raise revenue, then how do we cut from current budget allocations so that we could make up that deficit. And so that's a discussion that we're still having, and we're going to have over the next few months.
Shifting gears, according to Stop AAPI Hate, there have been over 2,000 reports of hate incidents against Asian Americans in the wake of COVID-19. What have you seen in Minneapolis or Minnesota?
We do see a few cases of discrimination or anti-Asian sentiments out there, and right now I applaud the governor and his administration for setting up a hotline with the Minnesota Department of Human Rights and the Minnesota Attorney General to really let the citizens of Minnesota, especially our Asian American, know that we have some resources available for you to tap into if you believe that you are a victim of hate crime or any kind of anti-Asian sentiment regarding COVID-19. And so we're slowly, working with local law enforcement to see what can we do to help our local Asian American community so that they don't have to go through this. And at least, a lot of our public officials, from the governor on down to state leaders like myself and our local leaders, we are speaking up against, some of these hate crimes or anti-Asian sentiments because we know that, this pandemic does not discriminate based off of ethnicity or race, that it impacts everyone, and we really need to call that out.
Worldwide, people have seen the death of George Floyd in the city of Minneapolis and the resulting protests. What is it like in Minneapolis right now, and how has your community reacted?
The situation in Minneapolis right now is tough, where there's a lot that's going on. For us at the state level, we're still trying to figure out what can we do to provide some kind of relief and aid for the city of Minneapolis, the city of St. Paul across the river from us, and surrounding communities that were impacted by the civil unrest after the death of George Floyd. And then now in the city of Minneapolis, we're having a conversation about should we defund the police? If we need to do that, what is the future of the local law enforcement for the city of Minneapolis? And I think these are good conversations that we are having, but I feel like it's a little bit too late. And right now we're seeing a lot of increase in violent crime and a lot of I think just crime in general. And so we really need to find a way to address this issue, whether that's defunding the police and investing in those funding for other public safety mechanism. I think that's something that we need to explore and explore quick. I have heard from a lot of residents, even our Asian American residents here, they are asking me, because the rhetoric out there is, oh, are we going to disband and not have any law enforcement at all? And I have to explain to them that that's not the case. The proposal is just to defund them so that we could actually allocate these resources into other avenues to provide public safety for our community. And so I'm glad that the ongoing discussion is there, but the situation is a little bit dire right now for a lot of my constituents here in the city of Minneapolis.
And the Asian Americans have taken part in these conversations about defunding the police. Have they been involved in the protests or otherwise?
We are seeing some activism from the Asian American community to stand up with the Black Lives Matter movement, to have conversation about how do we envision law enforcement going into the future. And so I believe the Asian American community is being engaged here. I would still like to see more engagement, especially over at the state Capitol and state legislature, to let us know what at the state level do we need to change to really have a Minnesota that's reflective of everyone, including our Asian American community.
So the current COVID-19 pandemic and Black Lives Matter movement has changed the state of the world drastically. What do you think is required of the United States and of the world going forward?
With COVID-19 and the death of George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter movement, I think that we as elected officials, we really need to listen first to what we are hearing from our constituents before we make any decision. And we have to be intentional about reaching out to marginalized communities or communities who have often not been at the table when we discuss policy. And we are doing this in the state of Minnesota, where we were able to pass some bipartisan police accountability reform to really address some of the issues that we saw with regards to the George Floyd case. For example, banning chokehold in the state of Minnesota, trying to invest in other resources and avenue for law enforcement, and some of our more well-rounded policy, like arbitration reform or statute of limitations for officer-involved death, did not get through. But that's the nature of the legislature, where we have to compromise with our colleagues on the other side of the aisle and the other body. And so going forward, I think we really need to have community participation in order to avoid what we saw with regards to the George Floyd situation. And still be mindful that the pandemic is not over, that there is potential for a surge, and trying to respect the guidelines that we are hearing and seeing from the health expert in the state of Minnesota and across the country.
You serve in leadership in the Minnesota House of Representatives. What are the overall challenges you see for the 2021 legislative session?
I think that one of the main issues that we're going to face in the 2021 session is going back to one of the points that I made up earlier, where right now with the state of Minnesota, we're projected to be in a $4.6 billion deficit. And so having to make the decision of if we were to raise revenue, which route are we going to take? Or if we are going to take some cuts, what do we need to cut from current allocations so that we can make up that shortfall? And this discussion is, can't not just be done over at the leadership level. It really takes the whole legislature, 201 of us here in the Minnesota House and Senate, and actually, being out in community to ask what Minnesotans want to see with regards to the future of the state.
Okay. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much for having me.